Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Nicola Donnelly, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Officer Cadet Finn Rogers. We warmly welcome the family of Lance Corporal James Claude Nicholls, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
If you require a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record, which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal James Claude Nicholls. James Nicholls was born in the Sydney suburb of Gladesville in February 1894. Known as Jack or Jim, he was the fourth of 6 children born to James and Harriet Nicholls. Nicholls spent his youth in Gladesville with his family. He attended the local public school before apprenticing as a carpenter with Gavin Park & Son Builders for 5 years. He was also an active member of the 5th Field Company Engineers. Nicholls enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force soon after the declaration of the First World War, signing his enlistment papers on the 19th of August 1914. He was assigned to the 1st Field Company Australian Engineers with the rank of sapper and commenced his initial training on the outskirts of Sydney. After 2 months of training, sapper James Nicholls departed Sydney in troopship Afric on the 18th of October 1914, sailing to Albany in Western Australia to join the 1st contingent in leaving Australia. Although initially intending to sail to England to reinforce British troops on the Western Front, the Australian forces were redirected to Egypt, where they spent the winter of 1914 and 1915 training. In March 1915, the Australians were sent to the Greek island of Lemnos as part of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force to prepare for the upcoming invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula. The 1st Field Company Engineers landed at Gallipoli within the covering force at 4:30 a.m. on the 25th of April 1915. Heavily involved in the initial establishment of defensive, gun and trench positions along the Australian occupied area. Over the coming months, the unit constructed defensive and gun positions, excavated trenches and dugouts, erected obstacles and established communication lines along the peninsula. Often in the front lines, it was dangerous and exhausting work. While on Gallipoli, Nicholls managed to spend time with his brother-in-law Bert, who was serving with the 4th Battalion. Both men frequently wrote home to Nicholls' sister Ida, and after Bert was declared missing in action in August 1915, Jim tried to find out what had happened to him for his sister. On the 18th of August, Jim was evacuated, suffering from rheumatism. Initially hospitalised in Malta, his condition was severe enough to warrant transfer to England for further treatment. Nicholls spent the final months of 1915 in Fulham Military Hospital, recovering from his illness, before leaving England for Egypt in late March 1916. Nicholls was only back in Egypt for a few weeks before returning to England to join the Engineers Training Depot at Christchurch in late May. There, he prepared to rejoin his unit on the Western Front. Nicholls proceeded overseas to France in early August 1916 and rejoined the 1st Field Company Engineers in mid-August. As support for the 1st Australian Division, the men spent the second half of 1916 primarily in the Somme Valley, with stints in northern France and Belgium for rest and training. Having passed the winter of 1916 and 1917 in France, the 1st Field Company Engineers was involved in the pursuit of German forces retreating to the Hindenburg Line in the spring of 1917, before moving into the Ypres salient in September. Aside from a brief detachment to another unit in the first 2 weeks of May, Nicholls remained with the 1st Field Company Engineers throughout 1917. He was appointed Lance Corporal on the 30th of September 1917. By early October 1917, the 1st Field Company Engineers was preparing for operations at Bellawood, just west of Ypres. The company assisted in the capture of Passchendaele Ridge, following the second wave of infantry as additional support. Shortly after consolidating the objective, an enemy aircraft flew over the area on a reconnaissance flight. Soon after it left, the German artillery began firing on the position. Nicholls was hit by shrapnel from a shell that rendered one of his fellow engineers unconscious. Eyewitnesses reported seeing him laughing and joking around on his way to the nearby dressing station. While headed to receive help, he was hit by another piece of shell. This time it pierced Nicholls' chest, killing him instantly. He was 24 years old. Nicholls' remains were buried in Boots New British Cemetery in Polygon Wood, Belgium. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal James Claude Nicholls, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.